Have you ever experienced the feeling of being trapped in a room with no windows? I'm not talking about literal walls enclosing you, but rather that deep sense of invisibility that seeps into your soul and makes you question your very existence. You keep doing everything as you should, praying, serving, waking up early, shouldering responsibilities that no one seems to notice. But it feels as if no one is truly aware. Not your friends, not your family, not even God. And the most painful part isn't the exhaustion you feel. It's the silence. That heavy, overwhelming silence that makes you wonder if you still matter, if you still have any purpose at all, if anyone anywhere can see the struggle you're going through. Invisibility wounds differently. There's no loud cry, only a quiet whisper every single day, suggesting maybe you've been forgotten. But what if I told you that this very place, the shadowy space where you feel most abandoned, might actually be where God is working most powerfully in your life? I'm not offering cheap comfort or magic promises. I'm pointing to a biblical pattern that has lasted for thousands of years and could be unfolding within you right now, in this exact moment. There's a woman in Scripture who lived 84 years in nearly complete invisibility. Her name was Anna, not the mother of Samuel, whom everyone knows, but another Anna, a widow and prophetess mentioned briefly in the Gospel of Luke. She lost her husband after only 7 years of marriage, and then devoted decades to fasting, praying, and patiently waiting in the temple. Nobody noticed her. Nobody spoke her name. She had no public platform, no recognition, nothing but a profound, quiet conviction that God's hand was still at work. Imagine that. 84 years. Most of her life passed unseen, unnamed, until the day Joseph and Mary brought the baby Jesus to the temple. And it was Anna, the invisible one, the forgotten one, the overlooked one, who recognized the Messiah. She had been silently prepared for a public moment of revelation that came after nearly 9 decades of unseen faithfulness. Today, we live in a culture obsessed with instant visibility. Social media likes, views, and followers shout the unspoken message. If you're not being seen, you don't matter. If nobody recognizes your tireless efforts, maybe you're doing something wrong. But God's kingdom operates on completely different principles. In His divine economy, the most transformative moments often happen far from any spotlight. Invisibility is not punishment. More often than not, it's preparation. The difference between the two depends entirely on what you choose to do when no one else is watching. When you feel invisible, the first battle isn't external. It's internal. You feel it physically as a tightness in your chest. Shorter breaths. A heavy weight that settles when you realize no one has asked how you're doing. You glance at your phone, hoping for a message that never arrives. You finish an important task and receive no acknowledgement. You serve tirelessly, care deeply, invest hours of energy. Yet it's as though it all vanishes into thin air. And then the haunting question arises. Does anyone care? Does God care? That pain you feel is genuine. It's valid. Let me tell you something important. Admitting you're hurting isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of honesty. Because God doesn't brush your pain under the rug. He doesn't tell you to just get over it or to stop expressing your struggle. No, He sees every part of your suffering. He always has. Yet, what God is doing behind the scenes might look completely different than you expect. It's a tough balance to hold on to, believing God is working even when you see no tangible proof at all. But that's exactly the kind of faith the Bible talks about. It's not a faith built on what your eyes can see, but a steady confidence grounded in who God is, even when everything around you seems to scream the opposite. Here's something fascinating. Many of the Bible's most powerful figures experienced long seasons of invisibility before their stories became public. Think about Jesus. He spent 30 years in Nazareth, quiet, unknown. 30 years before his 3-year ministry changed the world. Look at that ratio. 10 years of preparation for every 1 year of visible influence. During those decades, no one recognized him as the Son of God. He was just the carpenter, Joseph's son, a face lost in the crowd, seemingly invisible, yet far from inactive. During that time, God was shaping in him everything necessary to bear the immense weight of what was to come. Invisibility often serves as the hidden workshop where God refines our character without distraction. Imagine this. When people watch you, there's always an unspoken urge to perform, to tweak your responses, your behavior, or even your spirituality for their approval. But when no one's watching, you face the raw, unfiltered truth about what's really inside you. And it's precisely in that unobserved place that God dives deep into your heart. He strips away all that's superficial, exposing hidden motives and testing your faithfulness. Will you keep following him when no applause comes? When no one acknowledges your efforts? When it seems like nothing is happening? Because the real question God asks isn't, can you shine on center stage? But will you follow me when I alone see? Here's a question worth pondering, one that might shed light on where you stand right now. What do you do when no one's watching? And by that, I'm not talking about secret sins or hidden mistakes. I mean your genuine spiritual life, stripped of all performance and show. Do you still pray when there's no one to notice? Do you keep serving when no one says thank you? Do you seek God's presence when his voice feels silent? Because it's in these quiet, unseen moments, away from the spotlight, that true character is forged. If you find yourself in that hidden place right now, holding your breath, pressing on against temptation to give up, maybe God is trusting you more than you realize. He's preparing you to carry a burden bigger than what you can comprehend at this moment. And this preparation, it demands invisibility. Because if you were thrust into the limelight before you were ready, it wouldn't build you up. It would crush you. Let me share a biblical example that brutally embodies this reality. Elijah. After his dramatic confrontation with the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, a moment etched as one of the Bible's most public and powerful scenes, he didn't spray him with fame. Instead, he led him to a hidden place called the Brook Cherith, a secret refuge, an unseen place. This was Elijah's season of invisibility, a time God used to renew and prepare him for the challenges ahead. Imagine Elijah alone by a secluded stream in the middle of nowhere. There, the prophet was sustained by ravens, birds many considered unclean, and drank water from a creek that gradually began to dry up. There were no crowds gathered around him, no spectacular miracles unfolding before their eyes. Nothing but silence, solitude, and an unwavering commitment to obey God's instructions. Then, the creek dried up completely. Picture the scene. The very prophet who had just called fire down from heaven found himself isolated. No water, no clear plan, simply waiting for the next command. Elijah's invisibility at the brook was not a form of punishment. Rather, it was a shield and a preparation. God was teaching him absolute dependence before moving him to the next phase of his journey. The reason was clear. God understood that ego, inflated by public acclaim following a miracle, could destroy Elijah faster than any external enemy. So instead, it concealed and trained Elijah in secret. Invisibility brings a constant temptation. The urge arises to force visibility, to manufacture your own platform, to shout louder, to do anything just to prove you still matter. But acting on this impulse can actually undermine the very work God is doing within you. God's timing rarely aligns with our impatience. When you rush ahead or expose yourself prematurely, you risk bearing a burden you're not equipped for yet. Thus, invisibility becomes a form of protection, a divine way of saying, not yet. You're not ready. But keep moving, keep trusting, keep obeying, and remain faithful. Because what I'm building inside you far exceeds what you're asking for. That requires patience. A kind of patience that flies in the face of everything the world teaches you. Now consider how this applies to your everyday life. You wake up already feeling the heaviness of being unseen. No one asks how you are. No one applauds your efforts. You spend the day doing important work that goes unnoticed. The temptation to quit grows stronger. Stop trying, praying, believing that it matters. But what if in that very moment, God's gaze is fixed intensely on you, in a way you cannot perceive? What if your faithfulness in this invisible place is exactly what is preparing you for the next chapter? Because God doesn't seek those who sparkle only when under the spotlight. He desires those who remain steadfast when no one else is watching. This rare dedication is precious. It's the kind of faithfulness God uses to change entire generations. The loneliness that accompanies invisibility carries a unique kind of pain. It's not just about the lack of acknowledgement. It's the crushing feeling that your presence makes no impact. You look back at years of relentless effort that seem to have yielded nothing. Around you, others get celebrated for achievements you've been accomplishing longer and with greater dedication. Yet no visible reward comes your way. And the haunting question lingers. Why me? Why am I still invisible while others rise and receive recognition? There's no simple answer. God doesn't owe us explanations, but He does offer His faithfulness. And His faithfulness remains constant, regardless of whether we're seen or not. The reality depends greatly on His character. And one thing is certain. God's character never changes. He never forgets. He never abandons anyone. Nor does He ever let any experience you endure go to waste. Think about this. The most significant stories in the Bible often revolve around long seasons of waiting before anything remarkable manifests. Consider Joseph, who waited years trapped in an unjust prison before being elevated to govern Egypt. Moses spent an entire 40 years in the desert, tending sheep before he was called to lead a nation out of slavery. David was anointed king while still a teenager, yet he spent many years fleeing for his life, hiding in caves, unseen by those who should have recognized him. And what about Paul, the Apostle Paul? After his dramatic conversion, he spent 3 solitary years in Arabia, a period of deep transformation, so profound that Paul himself said he had to unlearn everything he thought he knew. 3 years alone, invisible to others, as God rebuilt him, preparing him for a ministry that would change the course of history. This invisibility was never accidental. It was intentional. God was saying, I have to prepare you before I can reveal you, because what lies ahead demands a foundation that only hiddenness can provide. Now, I recognize that this truth may sound beautiful when you say it out loud, but in day-to-day life, it honestly hurts. You're not flipping through a completed biblical story. You're living your own story, uncertain of how it will end. And in the heart of invisibility, trust is tough. It's hard to believe God is truly in control when everything around you seems to shout otherwise. But perhaps the real question isn't whether God is in control. He is. Maybe the question is whether you'll hold on to trust even when you can't see what He is doing. Because faith doesn't mean seeing the entire path ahead. Faith is stepping forward even in the dark. And God honors that kind of faith. He always has. Not necessarily in the ways you expect, nor on your timeline, but He honors it without fail. If you've noticed your prayers have become mechanical, like formulas, and you long to reclaim genuine intimacy with God, know that the divine code was created to lead you out of that spiritual desert. The link is in the pinned comment below. Choose your path, and together, let's return to what truly matters. I want to be honest. I have walked through times when I felt utterly invisible. I won't pretend I have all the answers, or that I overcame those seasons with grace. There were moments when I looked at my efforts and wondered, does any of this make a difference? Does anyone even care? The temptation was strong to give up, to quit, to chase after something that offered an immediate payoff. Something that made me feel seen and important. Something that filled that aching void. Yet, deep inside, I knew this was a test, not a punishment, but preparation. God was teaching me something crucial. I needed to remain faithful when no one was watching. Only then could I be trusted when everyone was. And that realization changed how I view invisibility today, not as a curse, but as a sacred process. Painful, yes, but purposeful. The truth is, invisibility strips away the distractions and reveals what you are truly seeking. If you serve God only to be noticed, invisibility will break you. But if your service is grounded in your love for Him, because He alone matters, invisibility becomes a transformative journey, one that molds, strengthens, and prepares you for all He has in store. Imagine this. Your worth isn't dependent on who notices you. In fact, it's when no one is watching that your strength truly grows. The difference between performing for praise and persevering through silence doesn't reveal itself during times of success. It surfaces when the applause fades away, when you're faced with a choice to quit or to carry on despite the absence of tangible reward. God watches that moment because there lies the essence of true character, not on a stage bathed in light, but in the quiet solitude of an empty room, in the unseen tasks completed with unwavering faithfulness that only God witnesses. Consider how this truth impacts your everyday life. You wake up, maybe not physically exhausted, but emotionally drained. The weariness comes from anticipating a day where your efforts might go unnoticed. You prepare your coffee, open your Bible, and pray. Yet beneath it all echoes a discouraging whisper. You? Why bother? Nothing ever changes. Still, you step into the day. You fulfill duties, serve others, work hard, care deeply, and invest your heart. Yet, no one asks how you're doing. Nobody offers thanks or recognition. Come evening, as you lie down, a poignant loneliness settles in, nameless but deeply felt. It's the solitude of feeling forgotten. What you might not realize is that in these very moments, God's presence is closer than ever. He sees you. Always has. Always will. The unseen work He's doing in the hidden corners of your life will fortify you for the glory He has prepared. There's a vital distinction to understand here. Harmful isolation is not the same as hidden preparation. If you're struggling with overwhelming symptoms, deep depression, thoughts of giving up, or difficulty managing daily life, please seek professional help and community. Spiritual encouragement is not a substitute for thorough care. God works through therapists, doctors, friends, and your church family. Admitting you need help isn't weakness or lack of faith. It's wisdom, because God never intended for you to shoulder everything alone. He calls you to trust Him and embrace the support He sends your way. On the other hand, if you're enduring a period of hidden preparation, still functioning, serving, but feeling invisible, perhaps God is shaping you for a very specific purpose. The important question shifts from when will this end to what is God forming in me right now? Waiting passively for invisibility to lift risks wasting the process. But when you actively cooperate with God's plan, even without full understanding, you will emerge transformed, not merely elevated. And that difference is monumental. Look at the story of John the Baptist, a man who lived in the desert, subsisting on wild honey and locusts, clothed in camel hair. He had no home, no comforts, and no social status. To the religious leaders of his time, he was invisible. Yet when he finally appeared, his voice reverberated through an entire generation, preparing hearts for Jesus. His power didn't come from comfort or recognition. It came from the preparation forged in unseen invisibility. The platform that John the Baptist built had its roots deep in the desert, the very place where God shaped him. John's power was not derived from the applause or approval of people, but from a period of invisible preparation. He didn't require human validation because God had already affirmed him in the quiet solitude of hiddenness. When the moment arrived for him to speak, his words carried the weight and authority forged from years of silent formation and spiritual discipline. This isn't a romanticized idea, but a clear biblical pattern. God forms his servants away from the spotlight before revealing them publicly. Many fail to realize this crucial truth. Invisibility, far from being a setback, serves as a protective shield. It safeguards you from your own vulnerability. Imagine being thrust into the limelight today, carrying all your unresolved wounds, mixed motives, and incomplete character development. The exposure would be overwhelming, possibly destructive. And God understands this perfectly. That's why he conceals you. Not because he has forgotten you, but because his love for you is so great that he refuses to expose you before you are ready. Invisibility is a form of mercy, veiled as abandonment. When you grasp this, not only in theory but deep in your soul, you will stop resisting it and begin to embrace it. Consider what God might currently be removing from your life. Pride disguised as confidence, a craving for approval masked as love for others, a fear of rejection hidden as humility, a reliance on human recognition dressed up as service to God. Each of these layers of false self must be stripped away before you can bear the weight of God's calling. This refining process doesn't unfold on grand stages or in moments of public triumph. It takes place in the empty room, beside the drying brook, within the cave of your solitude, behind prison walls of injustice, and in the quiet desert of unnoticed days. It is in those solitary moments, alone with God and yourself, that the truth surfaces. And truth often hurts. Yet, it also brings freedom. God chooses to free you now in invisibility rather than exposing you prematurely and watching you collapse under the pressure of your own fragility. Have you ever pondered what it truly means to be faithful when no one is watching? This isn't about surface-level morality. It's about profound integrity. It's about choosing to do what is right, even if you remain unseen. It's about serving others without expecting applause. It's about praying fiercely even when your prayers feel unanswered. It's about sustaining your belief when everything around you challenges your faith. This kind of faithfulness is what God desires, because it's easy to be faithful when there's an audience, recognition, and visible rewards. But faithfulness in invisibility demands something far deeper: total dependence on God. This is exactly what God is cultivating in you. Dependence, but not weakness. It is a strength unlike any other. When you finally realize that you don't need human validation, you become a formidable force against the kingdom of darkness. No one can blackmail or manipulate you, because you have learned to live without applause. And anyone who lives without the need for applause cannot be controlled by those who offer it. There is a difficult tension here that deserves acknowledgement. I am not saying that you... Let me be clear. Invisibility is not permanent. I'm not claiming that everything will shift overnight. I simply don't know what tomorrow holds. Anyone who guarantees that is misleading you. What I do know is that in those times when you feel unseen, God is at work. He's molding and preparing something within you that far surpasses any premature recognition you might crave. But yes, the experience of being invisible stings deeply. It's draining. It weighs heavily on your heart. Acknowledging this pain doesn't mean you lack faith. It means you are human. Even Jesus himself wept. He felt loneliness. He endured moments of being unseen and misunderstood. If he, being God, went through that, why hold yourself to such a severe standard for feeling the same way? I want to share something I learned through trial and error. For a long stretch, I believed that God was silent because I had messed up somehow. That my invisibility was a form of punishment. I thought if I just prayed more, fasted longer, and tried harder, God would finally look my way. But that relentless striving only left me more drained. Because the truth is, I was trying to earn something that had already been freely given. God had never taken his gaze off me. He has always seen me. He sees you right now. The true question isn't whether God notices us, but whether we can trust him. Especially when it feels like he's quiet. When hardships weigh heavy, when invisibility cuts so deep you feel like giving up. Because it's precisely in those moments of blind trust that God performs his most profound work. This was not a lesson I learned from a book, but through living it, by faltering, weeping, doubting, and little by little choosing to believe again. There's another truth invisibility reveals: who truly stands with you. When you are at your peak, everyone wants to be close, offering encouragement, seeking connection. But when invisibility sets in, when others gain nothing by staying near, that's when the real picture becomes clear. And it hurts, because you realize many people were drawn only to what you could offer: status, connections, or platform. When those vanish, so do most people, leaving you standing alone. Maybe, just maybe, this is God's way of cleansing your circle before he elevates you to the next season. He knows you can't carry the wrong people any further, so he removes them. It's painful but absolutely necessary. So, let me ask you earnestly, what would you do if no one ever noticed your efforts? If there was no stage, no audience, no applause, would you still press on? Your answer to this question reveals so much. If you say no, perhaps you're still serving the wrong audience. But if your answer is yes, if God alone is enough validation for you, no matter who watches, then you've already won the most crucial battle. You've freed yourself from the chains of external validation and found a liberating strength in God. The Bible tells us that Jesus entered Jerusalem on a Sunday, greeted by crowds shouting, "Hosanna!" Welcome and celebration filled the air. Yet, just 5 days later, that very crowd called for his crucifixion. Visibility is fleeting. Popularity can change in a heartbeat. This truth echoes through time to remind us that depending on human applause is unstable. What matters is the one who sees us, always. Human recognition is fleeting. Applause is just a temporary echo. But God's approval, that lasts forever. If you base your identity on the applause of people, you'll falter the moment it stops. Yet, if your sense of self is grounded in what God says about you, nothing can shake your foundation. It's when you enter invisibility that this truth is truly tested. When no one is cheering, you uncover the real foundation of your identity, discovering whether it's anchored in God or in something else. One of the toughest parts of being invisible is the absence of milestones. When your progress is visible, you see clear signs like promotions, accolades, and achievements. But in invisibility, none of these markers are there. Each day feels like a rerun. Same place, same routine, same challenges, the same solitude. It's tempting to think that nothing is changing. Yet, God doesn't only operate in what is seen. He works powerfully in the unseen. He transforms you inwardly in ways no one witnesses. He strips away pride you were blind to. heals long-held wounds you never addressed, and strengthens spiritual muscles that will prove essential later on. None of this appears on resumes or earns social media likes, but all of it is crucial preparation to bear the weight of what God has destined for you. Imagine this: if a muscle never faces resistance, it cannot grow. If a bone doesn't endure pressure, it won't strengthen. If a tree never meets the wind, it can't form deep roots. Invisibility is like spiritual resistance. It's pressure and wind that cause discomfort and pain, but these are the very forces that drive authentic growth. True growth never happens in comfort. It happens through struggle. And God knows precisely how much pressure you can handle. He won't break you, but He will stretch you, preparing you for something larger than you've ever imagined. You know what's remarkable? When you finally emerge from invisibility, and you will, because God is faithful, you won't want to return to who you were before. The person who went into invisibility was vulnerable, dependent on human approval, fragile. The one who comes out is strong, deeply rooted in God, and unshakable. You realize that invisibility wasn't wasted time. Instead, it was an investment by God, who was pouring values into you that no one can take away. Deep knowledge of Him. But what do you do while you're in the thick of invisibility, when the pain is still fresh? How do you endure without giving up? First, stop measuring your worth by visibility. Your value isn't tied to who notices you. It's rooted in the fact that God created you with a purpose. Nothing He makes is wasted. So, if you find yourself invisible right now, it's not because you lack value. It's because God is shaping you for something that demands more from you than you currently possess. This realization should inspire hope, not despair. Second, stay faithful in the small, hidden things. Being faithful when no one watches qualifies you for greater responsibilities and blessings that God has in store. Keep trusting, keep growing, and remember that your invisible season is actually a sacred time of preparation. Let's take a moment to reflect on a powerful truth Jesus shared. Whoever is faithful in little will be faithful in much. This tells us that faithfulness in the small, unseen moments counts immensely. God carefully watches how faithful you are when no one else is looking. There's a profound verse reminding us that God opposes the proud, but generously gives grace to the humble. One of God's most effective ways to humble us is through invisibility. When we are unseen, pride can't thrive, because pride craves an audience, demands recognition, and hungers for validation. But in the quiet solitude where no applause rings, pride withers and fades. In that space, true humility begins to take root. This isn't mere false modesty or an act performed for others. It's a deep, soul-level awareness that without God, we are nothing. When you reach this place of genuine humility, you become a formidable force against the kingdom of darkness. You are no longer swayed by compliments or tempted by promises of fame or visibility. You have mastered how to live without those things, and someone who has learned to live without cannot be controlled by the lure of having more. So, what steps can you take in the coming days while this state of invisibility still feels heavy? Start small. Choose one simple action to do faithfully, even if no one notices. Maybe it's spending 5 quiet minutes in prayer each morning before picking up your phone. Perhaps it's reading a chapter of the Bible slowly, without rushing, or serving someone completely anonymously, without any recognition. Do this consistently for a whole week. Keep it just between you and God. Don't share your efforts on social media or boast about them to friends. Watch carefully what begins to stir inside your heart. Don't look for external, flashy miracles. Instead, expect a subtle internal transformation, because that's precisely where God's working right now. After a week, add another small practice. You might incorporate a moment of gratitude before drifting off to sleep. or offer a prayer for someone who has hurt you, or perform an act of kindness that remains completely unknown to others. Keep building this rhythm of quiet faithfulness, because this hidden life is what God truly honors. It's not the life that gains more followers or draws more applause, but the one that remains faithful in the unseen moments. Repeat this pattern for another week. When it begins to feel routine or mechanical, return to your motivations, come back to God. Remind yourself that you're not doing this to gain something from the world. You're doing it because God alone is worthy, and that realization changes everything. I want to share a hard truth. Not all experiences of invisibility end the way you hope. Some serve God their entire lives without ever receiving public recognition. This is not a sign of injustice, but a calling. God's kingdom isn't a pyramid with a few reaching the top. It's a body with many parts, each serving different vital roles. Some roles are internal and invisible, yet absolutely essential. If God has called you to such a role, it is not less important. It is simply different. If you spend your life striving for visibility when God has placed you in a place of quiet service, you'll only find frustration. But if you accept your position fully, even with no applause, even without public accolade, you will discover a peace deeper than any human recognition could offer. And that peace, that deep, abiding peace, is the true reward of faithfulness in invisibility. Feeling invisible doesn't mean it's time to stop dreaming or halt your growth. Instead, it means surrendering the outcome to God while focusing on your faithfulness. Faithfulness is something you are responsible for, whereas the outcome belongs to God. Once you learn to separate these two, you free yourself from carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. You stop demanding things from yourself that are outside your control and concentrate instead on what you can manage: your faithfulness, your character, and your intimacy with God. This shift changes everything. If right now you feel unseen, I want you to hear this clearly. God sees you. He always has. What He is doing in your life at this moment, even if invisible to you, is far deeper and more powerful than any premature promotion or success could bring. He is removing what needs to be removed, healing what requires healing, and strengthening what must be strengthened. Yes, this process is painful. Yes, it can leave you exhausted. Yes, there are moments when you feel like giving up, but don't give up. The faithfulness you show when no one is watching is exactly what God seeks. He never wastes any part of your journey. Nothing you endure now is without purpose. You are not alone. Even when it seems that everyone has forgotten you, God has not. Even when your life feels insignificant, you are making a difference in ways you cannot yet perceive. One day, no telling when, and it may not be soon, you will look back and understand. You will see the connections, the purpose, and recognize what God was building during your invisible season. You'll be thankful, not because the journey was easy, but because it was necessary. Because God's love for you runs so deep that He won't leave you as you are. He is transforming you, and true transformation often takes place in invisibility. So take a deep breath, wipe away your tears, and choose to trust once more. God is in control. He always was. What He began in you, He will finish, not according to your expectations or your timing, but according to His perfect plan. And His way is always better. Always. Now share with me in the comments. Have you ever felt invisible and later saw the purpose behind it? Or are you in that place now and need a reminder that God hasn't forgotten you? I want to hear your story. If this video has touched something deep inside you, please subscribe to the channel. We're here walking this journey together, seeking God and learning to trust even when we don't understand. You are not alone in this.